Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and we are on book number 17 of the Marcus Didius Falco series, in which, basically, Falco's mother-in-law of his common-law spouse, Helena, says, okay, so we just got a letter in from our son, and we expect you and Helena to go collect Aulus and make sure that he actually goes to university in Greece the way he's supposed to. Because he was sent off to go to university in Greece and study law, and he has instead fallen in with a tour group and written them letters about a murder that happened during the tour and stuff. It's a whole thing. Anyways, so Falco lets himself be bullied into going, and he brings along his wife, and he brings along two of his nephews, and his nephew's friend, and the man who runs the gym where he, practices and keeps himself in shape and keeps his combat skills up to par. That guy sends his son along as well, and for their own reasons they bring along the young woman that they rescued from Britain, who may or may not be a child of Romans killed in the unrest when Boudica, Boadicea, however you want to call her, whichever you want to call her, decided to go tearing through Londinium and murdering everybody, and, so her parents were probably victims of that, but nobody actually... Anyway, she comes along and develops kind of a crush on, the trainer's son, who was hoping to be an Olympic competitor at some point. And the Olympics only kick in because they're going through Greece, and it is an off-Olympic year because the Olympics got messed up because a few years back, Nero, the, Emperor Nero, guy who fiddled while Rome burned, that guy, had apparently decided to rejig the Olympics dates so that he could participate in them because he wanted to. So the Olympics dates have been completely, messed around with so that nobody's entirely sure when they are, and it's just big mess. Anyway, so they go there, and before they leave, and this winds up being sort of a red herring and sort of a lead at the same time. Falco decides to talk to a man who lost his daughter, that the daughter went on a tour with the same group, the same tour group, guide company thing, and she had gone missing and had turned up dead. And it was a whole thing, that she had gone missing, and her father had, when no one found anything, her father had trekked all the way out to Greece and had gone looking himself and had found her remains on a hilltop and, had been very, very upset by this and had been trying to figure out how she had died, and he had assumed who had killed her. And so because she was a young woman who had died on a tour, like the young woman who died on the tour in the letter from Falco's brother-in-law, he says it's a possibility that it's the same person, so he goes to visit the father and find out what he knows. And, so he spends a large portion of the trip assuming at first that the two girls may in fact be linked deaths, that, the person who caused their respective deaths may have been the same person. This turns out not to be true at the very end of the book when he tracks... There's a woman that he keeps on running into on various paths, and eventually it's sort of clear that she's kind of trailing around after him or the tour group or something, because he keeps running into her. And she finally admits to being the aunt of the first girl that was killed, that she was supposed to be traveling with that first young woman. And, she winds up in a sort of an incredibly loony expository thing, telling Falco that basically the guy who runs the tour was kind of a jerk who, likes groping women and taking every opportunity to help them onto animals and stuff like, I'm going to help you get onto this donkey, and then takes advantage of the moment to grope, and so on and so forth. And she basically says, well, I had taken my niece and we were going to be somewhere away from him for a while, just for a break from him being leering and groping and stuff. And so they go to a hilltop and a storm starts, and she says, well, I tried to tell her not to, go near tall stuff, but she ran for cover under a tree, and lightning struck the tree and struck her, and she died. And then she says, and then, because the gods had taken her on the hill, I laid her out and crossed her fingers to her breast and walked back. And Falco's like, wait, you just left her there dead, then you went back to the group, and then you pretended she'd gone missing, and you didn't tell her father, so that her father spent like a year not knowing what happened, just that his daughter had gone missing. Then he finds her dead body on a hilltop, which leaves him to think that there's foul play involved, and he has spent literal years trying to find out the truth of what happened, and you decided not to tell anybody because reasons? And it's just this most incredible thing that kind of pulls away from the story entirely for a minute, because it sort of yanks you back to the beginning and to the thought of this poor man whose daughter had gone missing. He thought, he had no idea what happened to her for a year, and Falco's like, I'm going to have to go back to Rome, and I'm going to have to tell this guy that the aunt that he entrusted his daughter to, when she died unexpectedly in an act of God, because let's be fair, lightning strikes are not a thing you can predict, and sure, maybe she shouldn't have been going under the tree, but even so, you don't expect lightning. So there's lightning, and she dies, and he spends years, literally years, not knowing what happened, not knowing how his daughter died, and this woman has decided to just loiter around in Greece, doing nothing but drifting after this tour group because she thinks she's protecting them somehow. And Falco's just like, I'm gonna have to explain this to somebody. I'm gonna have to explain this to this girl's poor father. Oh, no. Anyway, she also turns out to have, some keys to finally solving what happened to the young bride who had died at the start of, before the start of the novel, whose death was actually the thing that sparked Falco winding up there. She has some information that is key enough that it gives Falco a chance to figure it out. And so they figure out who the murderer is, and eventually even find some proof, which basically happens in the last scene in one of those things that make me say, this is why I hate foreshadowing. Because you take something because there's a lot of foreshadowing at the start of the book, which you don't really realize what it is, because what the foreshadowing is a bunch of 12-year-old boys being 12-year-old boys. Because there are, as there always are, myths about somebody, Greek myths about somebody who, is murdered by another person, and that person chops them up and puts the dead body into a stew. It's a standard piece of fictional, plotting. We take somebody and we chop their body up and we put it in a stew, because then there is no body, and more than that, the body has been consumed, and there's, not going to be any evidence, and so on and so forth. That's kind of what goes into Sweeney Todd, among other things. But these, 12-year-old boys, having heard this story, decide to run around and point at everybody going, haha, every time that they have anything stew-like, going, ooh, it's that dead guy. Ooh, it's the dead guy from the story. Ooh, it's the dead guy from the story. Don't ask me which myth it is. I don't remember. I didn't take notes. And I don't actually have the book in front of me anymore because I had to return it to the library. Anyways, so the boys are being boys, they're doing their thing, and the fact that at the end of this it turns out that somebody has in fact chopped up one of the two victims, because the first victim, the young woman, she was found, and she was found having been beaten to death, but this young man who had been trying to find an answer to what had happened to his wife and who had killed her, he trekked all over the place and went to an oracle and couldn't get into the oracle at Delphi because it's the oracle at Delphi, and, you know, who's going to get into the oracle at Delphi who's anything short of a millionaire? But there are other oracles, so he goes to one of the other oracles, which it turns out the way that particular oracle works is they bop you lightly over the head, and then while you're mildly concussed tell you, you know, we're going to put you through an experience. And so they take these lightly concussed people and drag them by the feet through a dark cave, and when they come out the other end, they've had an experience, and they think they've got a revelation. It's a thing. Anyway, so it basically, at the end, but he goes missing, and it turns out that he was murdered, and the villain has chopped him up into stew, and it's sort of a thank you for that being the end of the book. But really, I've never liked foreshadowing. I've really never liked it, partly because, you know, I don't see it, because the best of foreshadowing is stuff that you can't really see coming, that it's sort of a warning, but it fits perfectly in with the book or TV show or whatever, that it's something that fits, that is not outre, that is not a thing. By the way, to every single person ever who has said counting down from 730 in Buffy the Vampire Slayer is foreshadowing, that is not foreshadowing. That is definably not foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is in loving memory when the camera pans past while Buffy and Angel are making out. Foreshadowing is not Faith telling Buffy in a cryptic dream things that are going to happen. That's not the definition of foreshadowing. Please stop it. You know, I don't like foreshadowing. I never read foreshadowing, but that's also because I'm very bad at reading between the lines, because usually I don't want to. But in this case, I also really, really wish that foreshadowing hadn't been there, because it was blatant enough that it comes up at the end of the book, and then I feel depressed, because I really didn't want cannibalism to be involved. It's not bad. It's valid. It's a perfectly good book. This is a fun, entertaining read, as all the others are. I like Falco working his way through the mysteries of Greece and finding out thing after thing after thing that, you know, that sort of ruins the capital M mystery of Greece, because that's sort of who he is. You know, there's a lot that's fun here. The Falco and Helena relationship is always delightful. But I wish the foreshadowing hadn't been there, mainly just because I didn't need the cannibalism. You know, valid plotting, valid and stuff, but really wish it weren't there, 'cause ew. Anyways, so I think that's all I really have to say. I shouldn't have waited a week and a half to talk about this after finishing reading it, but there we are. So that's everything, and yeah, I will see you all next week.